Greetings, everyone out there. It is I, Dracovin, Lord and Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome once again. We are going to be diving back into the world of Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I hope all of you out there are having an amazing day, a great morning, afternoon, evening, night, whenever you're watching this. Honestly, a great day in general. Today, we're going to be kind of hitting up the remainder of Pathfinder 2nd Edition rules. Today's all about the rest of the stuff that you as a player might need. Granted, a GM will also need this, but there's more information a GM that we'll probably need we're not going to be really talking about today. And some of this stuff is just the basics. It's a lot of stuff that most of us would know, honestly, and even a lot of us that have played D&D 5e, another different D&D, Pathfinder 1st Edition, you might know some of this stuff. But I'm kind of putting it into an entails of what the Pathfinder 2e version of it is, or for newer players, hey, you'll learn a couple of things that will be useful to your character. This is the... I could call it chuff. We're going to go over exploration, downtime, magic, equipment, and then magic equipment, and a little bit of crafting that's kind of connected to there too. So that's the idea of what we're going to go over today. And of course I have with me my handy trusted Pathfinder 2nd Edition core rulebook. And what we'll be doing as I move myself over to the corner here is similar to previous times we've kind of done this. We're going to be using the Archives of Nethys. That is not the Archives of Nethys. It's the Archives. I don't know why it reset. Technical issues. Whee! But yes, we'll be using the Archive Nethys' rules pages, which basically has everything that's in the book. Sometimes little bits of errata that have been put out. So, honestly speaking, if you're looking for something that's closest to what the new errata versions of the core rulebooks are going to be when they come out for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, dating this video, honestly it's going to be uploaded way before those come out anyway, this is the closest place that you're going to find those right now, but also when they come out, these will be updated. If you don't want to get the updated book or anything like that, for those of you out there who don't want to pay the extra. Anyway, let's start with exploration, because there's a few things to talk about here, of course. This is the second of the 3 main phases that your character's going to get into. We talked about encounters the last time we were kind of diving into the rules, which ends up mostly being combat, but that's your round-by-round encounters. This is, as they say here, freeform. It is a lot more large-scale, important things to what your characters are doing. This is still part of an adventure, though. While downtime is the large time in between doing things, this is still part of you going into a dungeon. This could be you traveling across a dangerous territory, that's to say, negotiating with merchants, exploring certain areas, kind of things like that, looking for an entrance to the dungeon before you find it, surviving in the wild for whatever reason. There's a lot of reasons to why you do exploration mode, but it is a little bit more freeform, and it's going to be a lot longer. So, first important thing here is they give us a nice little chart here of travel speeds. Why? Because if I'm skipping ahead by hours in my exploration mode, I know how far you go. Same with minutes, same with days. If I go like 10 minutes go by, we can easily calculate if your speed is 30, you've gone 3,000 feet. Does that mean a lot? Like half a mile. Feet in the miles. Off the top of my head, it's not quite exactly how. It's nowhere near half a mile, but generally around that kind of thing. So again, this assumes simple terrain. It doesn't get into any kind of terrain features which are going to, slow you down. Some terrains may require skill checks. This assumes, you're not having to worry about anything like that. Now, you have activities that you do while you're exploring. Yes, these are activities, and many of these don't actually have a lot of actions associated with them. For obvious reasons. You're not using these in a combat situation. Avoiding notice. It is an exploration activity. If you're using stealth, you travel half your speed. And they give some rules for, like, when you use it and travel faster and things like that. But basically, it's you're trying to be stealthy on your journey. You travel slower normally, unless you have like things like legendary sneak, swift sneak, or anything like that. But it means that when you get into an encounter with an enemy along that journey, you'd use your stealth checks instead of a perception check to determine if you have the initiative, while the enemy would be using perception as normal. And the perception DCs for your sneak is based on theirs, regardless of initiative check results. So, it's a very simple concept. It's an action you're taking while exploring that you are stealthing along. Defending. Again, this one here is just you are readying the shield, raise a shield action every turn. You travel at a half speed, you're a little slower, but you have prepared the raise shield action that when the first turn of combat begins, you have your shield up. You're ready to defend. Again, detect magic, you travel a little slower, but it means if I choose the detect magic exploration action, as long as I have the detect magic cantrip that I can cast, it means that I just have it going, and I'm like, okay, we're exploring right now, we're not dealing with a lot of stuff, I'm going to have detect magic going just because I know something magical could be in the area. We'll go a little slower, but I can pick it up. Follow the expert. Effectively, you have an ally that is doing a skill. One that's reoccurring, like climbing, performing some kind of special tactic or something. It's something that has to be repeatedly done as part of your exploring that one of the players is doing. What this happens is you are trying to follow them, and you basically get some assistance to it, and get a bonus to doing that check yourself because they are the expert. It's just an idea of if it's a exploration mode where you're climbing a bunch of rocky terrain and stuff where a lot of climb check has to be done, yes, perhaps you have one person who's really good at it. They can lead everyone else and give everyone else who might not be as good at it a bonus. Hustle. You move double your travel speed. It has a limited amount of time you can do it before you start to kind of tire yourself out. And it rather than giving you a penalty, it's just you can only do it for a period of time. So, yes, I can hustle, but whatever my con modifier times 10, a minimum of 10 minutes, is how long I can kind of hustle at double speed for. And that might mean that the smallest constitution modifier between all of the characters is how far your group can hustle before someone has to stop doing it. Yeah, as I said, they say the group one determines how long it is. Investigation is kind of using seeking out information as you're traveling. Again, it's another half-speed exploration. It's a mode that you would activate. Honestly, some of these versions of half-speed, different people can do them. So someone could be detecting magic while someone's investigating, while someone's ready to defend, and you can kind of put that together as a group to figure out what everybody's doing. This one is you can use recall knowledge, a secret check, discover clues as you kind of go along your journey. So that means that I, as the GM, would roll for you your recall knowledges as you're going along. But you're saying, like, I'm trying to make sure I pay attention to what's going on and know about it as possible. And they do say any skill that can use recall knowledge could be used here, but I, as the GM, will determine if that skill is something that you should use. You can repeat a spell over and over again. That's a simple one. Typically, they say this is a cantrip because you can use it at will, and it means that, certainly speaking, it will last the entire time. If I want a cantrip in effect, when combat breaks out, it must be when you can cast with 2 or fewer actions. And it's basically, you cast this activity when something out of the ordinary is happening, and you're like, oh, we got to be ready for something. So, you know, it just assumes that you're, like, doing a spell that you can repeatedly cast. Again, a cantrip, because those you can cast at will over and over again to keep it active during exploration. So it does have its own rules for that. Scouting, which is you scout ahead behind a group to watch for danger, moving at half speed. The idea for this one is you are, again, moving half speed, but you're moving ahead of your team a little bit, and that moving ahead a little bit would allow for your party to be ready in case of an encounter with a number of creatures. You're spending your half speed to scout. And then, of course, they have the search one, which you're looking for hazards, hidden doors, and stuff like that. Yeah. You're moving half speed again, because you're making educated guesses about everything. You're not really going to check everything, because if you check everything, you'll be moving a lot slower. The idea is you need to travel at no more than 300 feet per minute, which, if we looked up here, for 300 feet per minute, is 30 feet. And they say then 150 per minute to ensure you check everything before you walk into it. So that means you have a minimum speed you have to travel at to basically check everything. And slower than that might help too. There's a feat for that, for the maximum speed you come across. And basically, if I'm looking for a secret item, door, a hazard, or something like that, if there's one around, I would give a free secret seek check to notice that thing, if you take the time to say you're looking for it. I'm looking around, I'm traveling slower and searching for, traps or other hazards. Then I'm like, okay, if you would encounter one, I roll a secret check or something, which probably, you might, as a DM, I might roll a couple extra times anyway, just in case, just to throw them off that you never know when I'm rolling for an actual hidden object or something. Or if you're using Roll20, you could just do that too. Hidden checks. Hey, it takes time to make characters. There are other skills you can use, but the other big thing about downtime activities you have to talk about is rest during the downtime activities, because or exploration activities, because guess what? It's over time. That's a lot of time, though, still making a 4th level character. So, I hope it's a really good one and complex. It do be like that sometimes. It's effectively, you keep track of the hours. Once every 24 hours, you can take a longer rest, which is usually 8 hours. You regain your hit points equal to a con modifier times your level. You can recover from certain conditions. Be careful not to sleep in armor. And, if you go more than 16 hours before resting, you become fatigued. Ooh, Kitsune stuff. Cool. And then it gives you everything you get back, your focus points, your spellcasting slots, your prepared stuff. You can don your weapon and gear with the hours of... there's the hour for preparation after you've done your rest. Invest up to 10 worn magic items to gain their benefits per day. That's another thing. You get 10 magic items on your body that you get the benefits of. And again, once per day for this big rest. So, this is our exploration activities. And certainly there are some other skills that could be used for exploration that are kind of mentioned here. These downtime activities can be used a little bit during resting and stuff. But as you can see, there are other skills certain skills certainly can be used during this time. Let's move on to this old good here. I love 6th Strength. That's pretty good. It's pretty good in a kind of hilarious way. Good luck on that one, though. It might come to bite you in the butt, or it might not. But downtime activity is something we do want to chat about, of course, because this is the in-between adventures time. This is your day-to-day. And I'm going to be honest, there are plenty of adventures where downtime activity doesn't matter. You could be in an adventure where you don't get downtime activity at all. That there is no like long in-betweens in between the different sections of your adventure. One leads to another. Or it could just simply be that even when you get downtime activity, it's downtime is you don't have the same kind of downtime that you would be doing some of this stuff in. Or maybe you just don't have this stuff to do. Downtime is in kind of an option that's given. And it will exist, but if no one has a profession to earn money, or no one wants to learn new spells, or no one wants to retrain any kind of abilities, nobody has anything to sell, doesn't really matter. So you get your long-term rest, meaning that basically every day you have downtime, you heal up. You can retrain during that time. What does this entail? Well, sometimes I choose feats, skills, and class features that I honestly didn't like for my character. Dang, these suck. And the idea of retraining is a way to alter things in your characters to new directions, because maybe I chose something that just doesn't help my character at all. You need a teacher, whether, again, it's physical training, studying a library, magical trances and stuff like that. And as the GM, I would determine whatever kind of training you would need for that, where it would come about, and how difficult it would be. And again, certain things, they do say impossible to retrain, like a sorcerer's bloodline, you really can't retrain that one. But there are other aspects to it that you can. And the idea is you have to be able to take options that were available at the original options. A good example here is if you exchange a second level skill feat, you cannot take a skill feat that requires you to be 4th level or higher. You have to take one that would be still 2nd level. And you have to have met the prerequisites for the original feat. And again, you have to either remember that or ask the GM to make a call on that one. And you can cause another ability of your own to stop functioning. If I retrain one feat, another might not work. But what do I do about that then? Well, you got an issue, because that other one just doesn't work then. And you might have to retrain a number of abilities over a period of time. A feat takes about a week of downtime to swap out. You remove the old one and replace a new one. You can swap a skill feat for another feat. They have to be the same type of feat, though. That's the other thing. So skill feat for skill feat, ancestry feat for ancestry feat, class feat for class feat. But this one would be if I retrained if I had 3, let's say, fighter feats that require one leads to the other down the line, I could retrain any of them. If I train the first one, the other 2 I can't use. And I would have to retrain them also. At some point in time, but I would need that more time. So it might be better, kind of question mark, because each one of them you would have taken at different levels, to retrain the last one than the other ones, but maybe I'm retraining to a different feat chain. You can also spend about a week in downtime to swap out a skill increase. You to reduce the proficiency rank by 1 step and increase the proficiency rank of a new one. And the new skill rank has to be equal to or lower proficiency rank than the one you traded away. I mean, it's not as simple as that, kind of. Sort of, it might be. There are circumstances which it might be, honestly. Again, it would be GM call if it's something that's that radical, like a Sorcerer Bloodline. I might not allow you to retrain or something like that. But certainly, the proficiency where if I'm trained in something, I could get rid of that training and be trained in something else, Or if I had master rank, I could reduce that to a expert rank and then make something else a master rank, or make something be trained in. And then you say you can spend a week to retrain an initial skill you gain during character creation too. So this is the thing, is it doesn't just have to be skill increases you got by leveling up. Anything I got during character creation from my background, from my ancestry that I might be trained in, other than just my class, what I got for initially being in that class, I can retrain that too. Class features can be retrained also, but again, yeah, making fun of it's raw, definitely. Again, some classes require choices. You can change some of them. The thing is, something like if you change your druid order or your wizard school, it's at least a month. Changing your spell repertoire takes a week. So the different class features that you can retrain are very choosable by the GM, basically. So not only have to say, like, oh, you can retrain that, you have to know when. So, like, some downtime activities that you can use skills for were on the exploration list for whatever reason. Crafting, creating forgery, earning income, subsisting, treating disease. Those are all long-term things you can do that use skills. Craft, you're making something. Create forgery, you're forging a document. Earning income, yeah. Yeah, raw as rules are written. Thank you, Worm. Earning an income. If you've got some kind of profession or something, or using crafting, lore, profession to earn some money, you can. Subsist is basically, you know, I'm out in the wilderness, or even within a settlement. I don't want to spend money. How can I live without spending money? And same for treating disease, because it's a long-term feature. So there are other downtime activities. Most of these are the skill-related one. And there are some rules in the Game Master Guide for running downtime activities. If you are going to be doing it as a GM, you might want to look into that entire thing for it. As I said, it's not that this is not optional, it's just, it doesn't come up a lot. If you think about the list of, like, other skills plus retraining, that's pretty much all you do during a downtime. I either retrain or use some of my long-term skills. Sure, I can use my crafting or earning income to earn some extra cash, but it's usually not going to be anywhere the same amount that you're going to get from honestly adventuring. Oh man, I made 10 gold, or I'm sorry, I made 10 silver. What did you do, person who went adventuring during this week I was earning 10 silver? You raided a crypt and earned 30 gold. Okay, and a magical item. Okay. It can help. It's not, I'm not busting earning money. It can come up and it can be, like, really great to earn that money. It's just not a critical thing to your adventurer. That money might be helpful for something in a certain circumstance. Just in the general concept of what your character needs to be doing. Honestly, like, especially if you get to, like, 5th level or beyond, by then, the money you would earn for downtime activities of, like, crafting or jobbing. The crafting might be helpful for, like, making items your players, the rest of the characters can use. The earning some money, you probably already have more than enough for that. You don't really need to do that. And the retraining, maybe none of you need to. Again, downtime, it's there. It will always be there. It's just, you're not always going to be using it, in a way. So let's talk about magic and spells section here of this entire thing here. I'm going to try my best to summarize all of this as best as possible. So, there are 4 magical traditions, and there are 4 essences. That's the first thing we want to talk about. The 4 traditions are, of course, arcane, divine, occult, primal. Arcane is very logic, rational kind of spell casting. It's the idea that there is a order to the world, and that you're understanding and breaking down that order to alter it, in a way. That's the approach of divine or arcane casters. Divine casters are a step into faithfulness. They believe in some kind of power beyond their own, oftentimes a deity, but there are other powers beyond that of the material plane that they look to. Your cleric, looking to a deity, is the main one, but something like a divine blood sorcerer, where they're using energies from beyond the plane, they might understand that there. Occult. That's kind of like a weird one, as it's trying to go in a direction of you're trying to explain the unexplained and understand the unknown and bizarre. It's dealing into the weird parts of the universe and stuff like that. You're understanding the strange, esoteric, and unusual aspects of the universe and manipulating it that way. So you're diving into it at a different angle. Certainly there are some probably similarities between both arcane and divine in the way they break down things, but occult looks at it at a much more, yes, you are thinking about it, but you're looking into a thing that's a lot more unscientific, I guess is the way to say it. Yeah, you know, there are things that you can do, like, yeah, you can earn a few extra gold to buy some torches for the party. That is a perfectly fine thing to do. Do you need to do that? No? Could you? Yeah. So downtime exists, but you can kind of skip over it sometimes. Sorry, blow my nose. I should have muted it. I keep forgetting. I'm getting better at it, muting it when I blow my nose, so I don't bother all of you out there. Primal. Primal deals with the nature of the world. That's the easiest thing of it. There's a energy to living things in the natural world and the primal world. And primal traditions call upon nature and natural energies and the existence of, you know, the face in the natural order of the universe kind of thing there. So they're all different directions that take them into it. And as they say, for the essences, they're kind of like the essences of magic itself they deal with. Yeah, like abjuration doesn't really deal... And basically, the different schools deal with different things. There's matter, mind, spirit, and life. And the essences, as you look at them, is this something that you really need to dive into? I'm going to tell you, not really the essences. As much as I like to kind of call out the traditions, because that's important, the essences are there too. It gives you just an idea of what you're dealing with when certain traditions deal with them and when certain schools of magic deal with them. It just gives you an idea of what you're doing there a little bit more. I guess that's the best way to describe it. The basic idea also is for spell attacks, your spellcasting modifier, proficiency bonus, other bonuses, penalties. For DCs, it's your ability modifier, proficiency bonus, other bonuses, penalties, plus 10. Pretty simple there. Let's talk about their traditions. The magic schools. I mean, they do mention your spellbook here too, but that is in the book where they mention it. I like how they don't put these little they put the sidebars in, which are in the book, may I note, like, but they're not in the same order in the book. Like, the spellbook stuff is at the first page, and then the upcoming pages and all the rest of the stuff they kind of been doing, which is kind of a weird order. I don't understand what they're putting in the order for there, but anyway. Wizard Spellbook's the main kind of spellbook. It has a lot of stuff in there for being a wizard. We're daily preparing it. Anyway, now I'm going to mute it for blowing my nose, because I said I would do that when I could. Schools of Magic. Abjuration is about protection and warding. It creates barriers, affects certain types of creatures, prevents things from passing through an area. That's abjuration. Conjuration is transportation. This could be teleporting something, creating an object, bringing an object or creature from one place to another. That's the kind of idea. Any kind of teleportation trait type ability is going to usually be conjuration too. So teleportation and summoned are other conjuration traits you may have. Divination is basically learning secrets, whether it's past or future. Remote viewing an area, bestowing good fortune was also divination. They're very detection-based things. Prediction, revelation, scrying. Enchantment. Ah, enchantment. It's affecting the minds of something. I'm messing with the minds of an individual, influencing them, controlling them, maybe granting them great courage and influencing them that way. It doesn't always have to be for enchantment, like a direct mind control. I could bolster your own emotions or your own mind in a way to give you extra courage that you never knew you had. That's an enchantment effect. But is it helpful to have? Hell yeah. Is it not controlling someone? Yes. So mental emotions and fear are traits there. There is evocation. You capture some magical energy and basically, in a way, toss it at your foe to do stuff to them. This is usually types of damage. Acid, cold, fire, force, and sonic are the main forces, but there are some other ones that do exist out there. Those are the main ones you're going to use with evocation for blowing someone up. Illusion. It's exactly what it sounds like. You create illusions. You fool someone's eyes, ears, other senses. It's going to, depending on the type of illusion it is, it could be audio, visual, some other kind of mental trait. And there are ways that you can detect illusions. You actually have to kind of, either when you're seeking or spending an action to engage with illusion, you have a chance of making a check against the, whether it's a perception check or like a saving throw or another check against the spellcaster's DC to basically find out about it. If it is a mental type illusion, you will have to use a will save to overcome it. But otherwise, like if it's just an auditory or visual, your interaction in a way with it might allow you to notice something is off and be like, that's an illusion. Anyway. There's a morality to magic also, too. That's the thing about it. It's the idea that certain spells are going to be frowned upon by the community as a whole. It's sort of like, just as a comparison, our society has a level of morality. There are things you can get away with, and there are things that are seen as things that no one should be able to do. A lot of crimes are very, definitely amoral. But there's other things that people are allowed to do, but is also seen as not very moral and not very frowned upon. Something like making a deal with somebody that, yes, it would be something that they benefit from, but you greatly benefit from it. So it's sort of like taking advantage of a deal. Is it perfectly legal? In many circumstances, yes. Sometimes it wouldn't be legal, depending on what you're doing. But just for example, like, I'm selling, or this person needs money fast. They're buying something. I know that whatever they're selling has a greater value, or I can get much more value out of whatever they're selling. They're willing to sell it for this low price. They're willing to sell it for that. I will buy it for that low price, and then I could either fix it up or, sell it again myself to make much more of a higher price. People don't like that idea because you've taken advantage of their situation in a way. Is it perfectly legal? Yes. But morality, that's when we're getting into that situation. The thing is, there are spells like that. It's, the same way we look badly about that kind of thing. And there's a lot of other things that we look badly upon, even though they aren't things punishable by our laws, certainly. There are magic spells that either they have some vile, evil kind of things, profane connections, or do very dubious things that can be used in dubious ways. Enchantment spells are a great example of this. You're manipulating someone's mind. Certainly, like, they give the example. A dangerous ogre who has been very violent and, has been preying upon an area, using mental magic on them to trick them or to get them to surrender or something like that is fine. But if I would use that on a perfectly fine merchant who's done nothing wrong, it's not looked on very well. So, while as a system we're getting away from the concepts of good and evil and having an alignment, there's still this morality that exists within it. You can still be a bad person and be looked at as a bad person and honestly treated as a bad person or a villainous person. You might get it that rather than you directly breaking the law, you might get on the bad side of the authorities. They might recognize you as, hey, you're that troublemaker. We're looking for an excuse to go after you. So, even if we're not using the good and evil, lawful, chaotic system anymore, there's still repercussions for more immoral stuff you might do. So be careful when you use a lot of magic. Enchantment magic is the easiest one to do that, but there is spells that deal directly with very terrible and wicked things. Summoning a devil or a demon is always going to be a very terrible thing. They are creatures that are generally speaking the easiest things to describe as an actual evil in the world. Even if you move to the gray morality of your general people, these are things that are terrible creatures that are looking out for a very negative energy in the world. So bringing them out is, not great. And you're doing that. You're bringing that negative emotion. Anyway. Necromancy is harnessing the power of life or death. You can sap energy from create a life-saving energy. So the thing about necromancy spells is there are curse, death, healing, negative, and positive traits. Necromancy does do such things as, I don't know, summon some gosh darn undead for you to be friends with. You can certainly do that with necromancy, but the other thing that necromancy can do, which, is an important thing to think about, is healing part of it. It's important that way because you're dealing with the negative and positive energies of the world. So, if I would to be just a simple, I'm making sure I'm checking that. Heal, the spell, which a lot of classes that can take it will have, honestly. It's a necromancy spell. So necromancy is a catch-22 of these kind of things. Transmutation is altering or transforming a physical form of a creature or object. Any kind of morph and polymorph things, you're changing an object from one thing to another, one form to another form. That's transmutation. So, spell slots. We have talked about spell slots. We've talked about level of spells. My nose just keeps on running now that I'm speaking a lot. But anyway, spells are from level 1 to 10. There are cantrips there. You're going to have the lowest level of level 1 spells, the most amount of level 1 spells, the higher spell slots you're going to have the least amount of. But as you advance in levels, you get those higher levels, eventually get to 10th level spells. Clerics, druids, and wizards in very similar classes prepare their spells. They have to do their full rest, and afterwards they spend an hour preparing the spells that they want. If you want to pass a spell more than once, you have to prepare it more than once. Cantrips are the exception, that you can prepare a cantrip once, and that's your cantrip for the day. There are oftentimes things that you can swap out some of your prepared spells. Spontaneous casters, bards and sorcerers and the like, basically have a list of spells that they can cast from, and at a moment's notice, they can just cast a spell. It's from their kind of daily allotment of spells in your repertoire, and that determines how many spells you have, your character level, your class combined. And when you refresh yourself daily, those spell slots that you have available to cast spells from your repertoire are there. Heightened spells. This is an important part of this entire thing too. We have talked about heightened spells to a degree, but now I will go over it formally. What does this all mean? Well, be you prepared or a spontaneous caster, you can basically cast a spell at a higher level than the listed for the spell. It's heightening. A prepared spellcaster, you basically heighten a spell by preparing it in a higher slot than its normal level. If a fireball is 3rd level, I can prepare a 6th level fireball. It is in a 6th level slot. A spontaneous caster, you also cast it by using a higher level slot, as long as the spell of that level is in your spell repertoire. There you go, that's the important thing too. For the spontaneous caster, I have to have in my repertoire not the 6th level fireball. can't cast it at a lower level. I have to cast it at that 6th level because it's in my repertoire. If I also have it on my 3rd level, I can cast it both 3rd level and 6th level, but not 4th or 5th. I don't have it in the repertoire. That's why a lot of these spontaneous ones have the signature spell ability, where I could be like, boom, that fireball, I can cast it at any of the levels I have available. So that's the advantage of the spontaneous ones there when it comes to heightening. Your signature spells are your best way to do a lot of those. Many spells have benefits for heightening them. Fireball, extra damage the higher level you heighten it. A spell will tell you the extra things it does at the end of its spell block. So it will mention any, and it either has every number of levels something happens, or at certain levels things happen. It could be that at 5th level, if I heighten this to 5th level, I get this. It might mean that if it's like 1st level spell, I would only need it at 1st and 5th level, and that's it. I wouldn't need any levels in between for like a spontaneous caster, and of course then if you're just a prepared caster, it doesn't matter. But it could mean you can also have plus every level you go higher, something happens. Every 2 levels you go higher, something happens. Cantrips, we've talked about before, they are basically a flexibility that you have. They are a simple spell that you have that you can cast at will. Any number of times per day. I can just keep casting that spell over and over and over and over again. Prepared casters prepare a number of cantrips each day. It has to be in a cantrip slot. It can't be in a spell slot, so you can never have it higher than that. The spontaneous casters have a list of cantrips, and these are automatically heightened to half of your level, rounded up. So at 2nd level, it's a 1st level. At 20th level, it's a 10th level. And oftentimes cantrips have their own heightened rules. Focus spells. We've talked about focus spells because a bunch of classes have those. You have a pool of focus points. Traditionally, it starts out as 1. And you can use that focus point to cast a focus spell. They're automatically heightened to half of your level, just like cantrips. And you can't cast this focus spell if its minimum level is greater than half of your level rounded up, if I somehow gain access to it. So I could gain, let's say I gain access to a 7th level focus spell by some reason. If I am not 14th level, or 13th level at least, I can't cast it. Focus spells cost you 1. There are focus cantrips which don't cost you any focus point, but other than that, every focus spell you have costs 1 focus point. Remember, I have 1 focus point, meaning that I can only cast 1 focus spell. Even if I have 20 focus spells, only 1 per day. You get them all back with your daily preparations, and there's the refocus action, which takes you 10 minutes to also get back 1 focus point. So I can take 10 minutes to get it back, like a kind of short rest to regain my focus pool. But that's pretty much all I get with that. There are other abilities that will increase your focus pool beyond 1 to a maximum of 3. That is also another thing. There are certain things that can overlap with refocusing, like tending to allies' wounds and stuff like that, or identifying the magic of a spell while refocusing. So things you can do while refocusing, it specifically does say. You're not just done with that. You can get focus points from multiple sources. It just adds to your pool to a maximum of 3. So if I'm getting focus points from a cleric, and I get up to like 1 from there, and I get into another archetype or something that gives me a focus point, I just have a 2nd one. And then I could take an ability under my cleric that would give me a 3rd one, you know. But it's you can get more than 1 by just having it from different sources. If you were a multi-class archetype of a champion, let's say, and get your healing touch ability, that's a focus ability. Hey, another focus point in there. Focus spells will be the same tradition as your whatever you're casting as. So if you're a bard, it's a cult. If you're a sorcerer, whatever your bloodline is. There are some classes like monks that get stuff with focus points. They're kind of like they don't have a source then, really. They still act the same way. You still have the same proficiency as you would for your class. But it'll basically, rather than your tradition determining all of your focus abilities, any focus ability that you have would have a tradition associated with that. So as a monk, if I take this ability, it's got a tradition ability with it, connected with it. And there are also innate spells, which you might run into. Certain ancestries get innate spells, and certain other groups do. The entirety of an innate spell is one that you can just cast, even if you aren't a member of the spellcasting class. It's usually once per day. If it's more than once per day, it will tell you. You refresh these at your daily preparations. If it's a cantrip, it functions just like any other cantrip if it's an innate cantrip. It'll be heightened to half your level, and it will follow the rules for that. You're always trained in your innate spells for DCs and attack rolls. And use your charisma modifier for innate spellcasting unless specified. So that's another important part about it. So it doesn't matter if I'm a fighter with an innate spellcasting thing from something or anything else. It doesn't matter. I'm always using my charisma for that. Monsters have a bunch of innate spells. That's a good suggestion of what has innate spells. English. Thank you. Work. Mute. Okay, we're a good chunk of the way into magic here, but we're at a very important part about magic here. Casting a gosh darn spell. I mean, the sheer fact is, it's a relatively simple concept to cast a spell. I have to have it either prepared or in my repertoire. I choose which spell I have. It is at the appropriate level for that spell. The spell tells you what kind of actions it has. It might say it costs 1, 2, or 3 action. It might be a reaction. It might be a free action for certain spells. It will tell you that. Certain spells have longer casting times. They might run into one. That it might be more than just the actions required. It'll describe it if it needs more than just 3 actions. It'll break down the amount of time. Could be minutes, could be hours to cast certain spells. So that's something else to keep an eye out on. If you're doing something that's a lot longer than just a turn's worth of actions, there's possibility of doing some other stuff during that time. It's just GM discretion, like what you're doing. It's very much more like exploration or something like that. You wouldn't be doing it more in a counter, because you're definitely going to be disrupted there. Otherwise, like if you're doing a lot of downtime exploration type activities, you're able to kind of do it on the side without being interrupted. Spells have components. Yes, components. Material component, somatic, and verbal are 3 different components. Focus is another component. These are the components of what you require to cast a spell. Material is a little bit of physical matter consumed during the spell casting. You have to have a hand free to cast a spell with a manipulate during this thing. So you do need a manipulate, and you need that manipulate to get a material component. Basically, you're getting it from your component pouch. Unless there's extreme circumstances, there is a material component pouch, which is going to have all the basic components. Anything that's basically listed there, you're going to assume it's in there unless it specifically would have something like a higher price or something of material. That's the easiest way to say it. It could just say a material in the list of the spell. And honestly speaking, I'll try to look up a quick material spell to see if I can give a good example of something in one of these pages of spells. You know, as soon as you want to like find something, oh. Nope, that's not a material. Yeah, as soon as I want to find something with material, I just can't find it then, apparently. You know, that's the usual. Nope, there's one. False Vision has a material to it. But it doesn't list any extra material, so what I'm going to assume is their material component pouches would have enough for it. Effectively, if it's something beyond the material component pouch, it'll talk about that in the spell. But otherwise, it's just like a little bit of something that you have to pull out and use as part of the spell. Somatic, have to have a hand free. Why? What is somatic? Moving your hands. I have hand motions. That's somatic. I'm doing something with my hands. I have to have them free. Oh! Sorry. Book wrong. Traditionally, each component you have adds one action to the actions needed for the spell. If I'm doing a material, somatic, and verbal, it's going to cost me 3 actions. Or more. The one I talked about was a 10-minute per level one. It's much longer. I'm going to have a drink here for a second. Sorry. But yes. Somatic, you're moving your hands to manipulate stuff. Verbal, you're saying stuff. It's a concentrate type thing. I'm speaking right now. I'm using a verbal ability. So if I'm speaking, making hand movements, and have to have picked out, like with one hand while picking out something from a pouch from another, there's my 3 actions for casting the spell. And again, each spell component, if it's got multiple, kind of gives you an idea of how many actions it's going to take. Usually, if it's like 3 actions, material, somatic, verbal, 2 actions, material, somatic, verbal, or something, a combination of those things. Each component adds an action almost. And then focus is the other one here, which it's similar to material, rather you have some kind of object to focus on. Whether it's a specific object for the spell, or it's something related to your class. Like if you're a cleric, maybe it's a holy symbol. If you're a druid, maybe you have a focus of like a sprig of some kind. It depends on what you're doing. And guess what can happen? You can be disrupted and lose spells. So there are some abilities that can disrupt spells and cause the spells to have no effect. The spell slot is used. The actions and costs that might be associated with it are used. You've already used the cast a spell activity. If you were sustaining a spell ends immediately. But yes, there are more rules for that, but the basic idea is you can be disrupted from casting a spell. It can happen. Metamagic. We'll mention this now. A bunch of spellcasters gain access to metamagic actions, typically by metamagic feats. They basically tweak the properties of spells, changing its range, damage, or other properties. That's a simple word of saying it. Effectively, you have to use a metamagic action before the spell you want to alter. So the action I do before casting the spell has to be a metamagic action. It basically sets up the metamagic spell afterwards. And the metamagic action is defined by the metamagic ability you're using. Pretty much about that. We talked about spell components here. Range, area, and targets. Touch range, you have to be able to touch it. That's pretty obvious. Yeah, that's one of the basic range. I have to be able to reach over and poke something. If a touch spell is increased in range, you start at 0 feet and then go out from there. Areas are something that bursts out into an area. There's a lot of shapes. They show off a bunch of shapes over here in this nice thing. Let's click on it for a second. Look at this. These are a bunch of the shapes here. Lines, cones, emanations, and bursts. Emanations come from a specific creature and therefore have rules coming from the center of that creature. Bursts come from a specific point. Cones come from a corner of a creature. Lines from a kind of similar to that. So those are all the basic shapes you can take a look at there. Any area effect basically uses one of those shapes. And then there's also spells that target something directly. It has to be within range, be able to see it. So you have to be able to perceive it to target normally. There are some spells that to target with a little less accuracy. The spell itself will tell you if it's a little less accurate of a spell. If not, you will safely assume you have to be able to see the thing, and it has to be within range. There are rules for detecting creatures. You look those up if you're going to use them. You choose a valid target. That's the other thing. It has to be a valid target. A vampire is not a living creature, and if the spell says a living creature, you cannot target a vampire with it. So you have to make sure it's also a valid target. It can also affect multiple creatures in an area, so it can have both target and area. Basically, rather than something like a fireball, which just does an area, it could be something that targets a number of creatures within that area. So you're still not targeting indiscriminately. You're still choosing your targets, but it's targets in an area. Sometimes it also says it has to be a willing target. And the last thing is line of effect, which is also a very important thing you have to have when casting spells, because line of sight is not line of effect. Yes. You basically have to be able to draw the line to the target, but the thing is, there are things that can disrupt line of effect that do not disrupt line of sight. I will give you a good example. A wall of force. Why? A wall of force is goddamn invisible. It blocks a lot of stuff. Wall of force is normally see-through. I can see through it. It blocks things physically from going through it. My spell can't go through it. My line of effect doesn't go through it. That's one of those rare times that you get line of sight and not line of effect, but normally you have both of them. But they are two different things to consider because situations can apply. They don't. Spells have durations. Some might last until the end of a turn, a number of rounds, minutes, longer. If you track the number of durations in rounds, at the beginning of your round, the rounds decrease. So it's basically when your turn starts, the round goes down. Glass windows as well is a good example too of another one that disrupts line of effect. Sometimes it has an ongoing effect that isn't exactly magical, but has some things in time. Like if it created something, it might just last. So there's a duration to that technically, but it's like an infinite. Like if I created some water, the water's just gonna be there. The spell's done, the water's there. If I would die or become incapacitated during a spell of a duration, it keeps going. Unless it's a sustained spell. Why, yes, there are these spells with something called sustained on them. A spell with the duration sustained and lasts until the end of your next turn unless a sustained spell action is taken. So the duration will say sustained. You have to take one action to sustain it. Now, the thing about a sustained spell, it says choose one spell with the sustained duration you have. The duration of that spell continues until the end of the next turn. Some spells might have different or expanded effects if you sustain them. Sustain for more than 10 minutes ends the spell and makes you fatigued unless the spell lists a different maximum duration. That's a pretty easy way of saying it. So you become fatigued if you go for 10 minutes sustaining a spell. But an important thing about this entire thing here is, drum roll please, you can have more than one sustained spell. How, you may ask? 3 actions. 1 action to sustain spell. 2 actions to cast another sustained spell. You can spend 2 actions to sustain a spell because it says choose one spell with sustained duration you have in effect and do it. So you can have multiple sustained spells, but you also still have to be worried about, maintaining it for more than 10 minutes. There are things with long durations that keep in track, things like 24 hours and stuff. You'd have to keep track of it outside of. Some spells can be dismissed early. If a spell can be dismissed early, it is a single action called the dismiss action. There you go. Pretty simple as that. Saving throws. We've talked a little bit about this, but now is where we're coming into everybody's favorite thing here, the basic saving throw. Because spells are where this comes into, because so many spells and abilities will list make a basic reflex, a basic will, a basic fortitude. Now we can figure out what a basic saving throw is. Saving throws do come in 2 forms. You roll a saving throw, or it uses the caster's, which uses the caster's DC, or sometimes a saving throw can be targeted. It would be a saving throw DC for a spell attack. A spell can attack its AC, or it can attack its, like, save DC. That can both happen. Basic saving throw. If a saving throw says it's basic, what does that mean? It means that on a critical success, I take no damage. On a success, I take half damage. On a failure, I take full damage. On a critical failure, I take double damage. That's it. Simple as that. The rules, I think we've maybe talked about this a little bit more, I think in the last episode, but this is really where it shines in spellcasting, is the basic saving throw. So, for identifying a spell, if you've prepared that spell, or you have it in your repertoire, you automatically know what it is, including what level it's heightened to. That's an advantage. If I see someone casting Fireball, and I have Fireball either prepared or in my repertoire, I know what Fireball they're preparing, and I know what level they're preparing it at. Hey, that's an 8th level Fireball. Yes, so basic saving throws are very nice, but if you roll a critical failure, it's double damage on a base. So base saving throws are all about that damage. There's also using recall knowledge with an appropriate, basically, check. Or identifying magic and stuff like that. So there are rules for that, for identifying magic. It has to be an action, though, to use that recall knowledge. And basically, you would have had to notice it being cast. Some kind of visual manifestation, hearing some of the components or stuff like that. Or it has to have kind of long-lasting effects. If it's long-lasting, the identify magic is probably better instead of a recall knowledge. But like if someone's casting a spell going like Obadiah, Navorum, Cessna, certainly you could use recall knowledge on that. Counteracting. Dispel magic can use to eliminate other spells. Hey, you can use a counteracting check using your spellcasting mod proficiency bonus against for the spell passing with. Basically, you can counter another spell using spells like Dispel Magic to eliminate another one. There's preventing hostile actions, or a spell ends if you use a hostile action on a creature. It has to be something that can harm or damage it directly or indirectly. That's important about a hostile thing. It can even be indirect harming of something. Anything that you would do that would be an action that would cause indirect or direct harm to something is considered hostile. If it's unaware that it could cause them harm, it does not count. So, if you do something that it doesn't know will cause it harm, it's not hostile. You know, if I know there's a horrible monster behind the door, and I open the door, and it doesn't know there's a horrible monster behind there, well, you know what? And there are triggers, too. They talk about setting triggers. Walls, give positioning for those. Let's talk about reading a spell selection here. Boop, 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 boop. Here's our example spell casting here. It lists the tradition to begin with. Okay, cool. This is listing all the traditions the spell can be cast under. That's the important part about this spell, too, is it's letting us know which traditions this spell will belong to. We already have the spell name up here and the spell level here. So any traits it would have would be right here. Remember we talked about traits before. So we got the name, level, traits, traditions it can be cast under. Which means if it's a level 3 spell and it lists, like, let's say, Arcane, Divine, and Occult, that means I know if I'm an Arcane, Divine, or Occult caster and I can cast level 3 spells, I have access to this. Cast shows the number of actions required to cast a spell here. It shows the available icons to do that. As do any kind of, if it's a free action or reaction, it will list it there too. It'll also take if it's longer than a period of time. So it's like, oh, it's a minute to cast it here. This gives you a lot of the basic information for casting the spell. The easiest way is when you look at something, you'd be like, oh, yeah, here is all the amount of time it will take here. What is that spell that I looked up earlier? False Vision. Like, False Vision says it's 10 minutes. It lists it's 10 minutes there. It also lists the spell components there, too. Cost requirements, triggers, or anything else like that is included. It's things that cost extra money, valuable material, or other special resources to be able to cast a spell, also listed here. So cast gives you a huge swath of information. Not only how long it will take me to cast it, if I can cast it in combat, what kind of actions it will be, the types of actions it will be, anything else I need. Then we have ranged, area, or targets. Well, it's those three things. How far can I use it? What can I affect? Does it affect an area? We talked about those, lists all those. Then saving throws and durations. It tells you if it allows a saving throw and what type of saving throw it is there. It might say it's a basic reflex save, or it could just say it's a reflex save. And then you have to assume that the spell will define the type of reflex save it will have. The details on that save will be listed in the description unless it's a basic one. If it's basic, they're not going to really add those special details of like what happens when I make the save. Because it's a basic. We talked about what a basic saving throw is. Well, I haven't had background music on. I'll turn it on right now. Enjoy a little background music for the back end of this entire thing. Probably haven't really needed it, but it's nice to have. Also, duration here. It would tell you whether or not like it would be something that you'd sustain, or if it would have a similar kind of duration, or if anything persists after the spell is cast. Then it gives a description of the effects, giving all the information. It might include stuff for critical success, success failure, and critical failure. And then it has a listing of how the heightening works. At what level, what levels and stuff, where the heightening stuff does. Spell traits. Here's a bunch of spell traits. Remember, these are traits. We talked about traits. These are specifically ones that are usually under spell. If you want to read about them, here we go. Auditory, darkness, light, incapacitation, minion, polymorph, summon, visual. They are very traity. Traity? Traity? Traity. So, rituals. Good old 408 introduced us to rituals here. As this was another section of magic that we want to talk about. And the last one we're going to talk about here. So rituals are complex spells that you can cast. It takes a lot longer to cast a ritual spell than a normal spell, but they have a much bigger, powerful effect. There's one person in charge of the ritual, the primary caster, and can have secondary casters assisting them. You can be a primary caster for a ritual even if you can't cast spells, but you have to know the ritual. So that's an important thing about being a ritual caster here is I don't have to be a spellcaster to know rituals. I just have to know the ritual. And the ritual spell level has to be no higher than half of your level rounded up. If I learn a 7th level ritual, I have to be 13th or 14th level. If I learn a 3rd level ritual, I have to be 5th or 6th level. You don't use spell slots to cast rituals. The primary skill check for that ritual determines its tradition. So there's an important part of this in things. You have a required proficiency rank in the skill used for the ritual's primary check. And you as the primary caster must make the check. Meaning, if I'm a fighter that knows rituals, if I want to cast occult rituals, I have to be trained in occult at least, or maybe better. I might have to be an expert, or master, or legendary in occult to cast certain rituals. But if I do, me, Joe Fighter, can use these rituals. And I can learn them. Ritual is technically a downtime activity. You can cast it during exploration if you have enough time. It usually takes at least an hour to cast. So that's why it's more downtime than anything. Most of these things are listed in days, which you have to have at least 8 hours of participation from all rituals and everybody who's casting it. The breaks are, there, allowing some rest, but you have to at least spend 8 hours during the day using the ritual. Effectively, what happens is one person keeps it going, the others rest for a little bit, and kind of take turns during a period of the time. And they're all material, somatic, and verbal components. throughout its casting time. Learning a ritual. They're never common. You have to find someone who can teach you. That's a big thing. So to learn a ritual, it's not against your limit of spells, in your repertoire or any kind of spell casting ability. Because remember, you don't have to be a spellcaster to cast a ritual. You just have to learn it from someone. You just have to find the person that knows it, and they have to be willing to teach you. And then a ritual has a cost. This ritual valuable costs, and it's basically the a ritual will tell you its cost section. It's consumed when you make your primary skill check. The costs are presented as a base cost multiplier by the target's level and sometimes the spell's level. Those are important things about it. There's a chart for that. Anyway. Secondary casters are sometimes required by rituals. They don't need to be. They don't need to be able to cast spells. They don't need a minimum level or skill proficiency. The secondary caster entry will present anything that they require for that specific secondary caster. So that's the thing. If the secondary caster needs something, the secondary casters will be listed. Checks. It'll tell you what kind of check it is, the primary one, and the level it is. The DC is twice the ritual spell level. Primary checks usually have a very hard DC for a level that's twice the ritual spell level. Oh, okay, I'm sorry, no. Primary checks usually have a very hard DC. Okay, so it's usually for a level that's twice the ritual's spell level. I guess it's a very hard DC, using the DC chart. My brain was fried there with information. You have to look up the DC chart for that kind of stuff, and the GM can adjust it as necessary. There are sometimes secondary checks, where it's basically another check that goes along with it. Usually with a standard DC for a level twice the ritual spell level. So, whatever's if it's a second level ritual, it would be a high DC for 4th level. That's basically what it would be. Or standard DC for 4th level for the secondary check. It'll tell you the number of secondary checks. Secondary casters attempt their checks before they attempt the primary checker. Yeah, so... Basically, secondary casters have to do the secondary check, is the important thing about the secondary check. So, animate object, for example, a secondary object for check is crafting. Meaning, my secondary person, though they don't have to be able to cast magic, and don't have to know the ritual, and don't have to do anything else of that, the one thing that they have to be able to do is make a crafting check of, since that's a ritual 2, a standard 4th level DC. And if there's more than one secondary check, you need more than one secondary caster, or secondary casters. And they do list a number of secondary casters that can be had too. Anyway, and they can give you bonuses on the primary check. Then, of course, the things have an effect. Right there, ritual. That's ritual spellcasting. Cool. We finished that up. Sorry there. You can get on it. Your brain fries a little bit. We've hit that nearly the hour and a half mark, and we're getting close to being done here. Fortunately, this was the big section here of magic. Which now that hopefully you understand a little bit about magic and rituals and stuff like that, and rituals are a fun little thing, you might want to look up what rituals there are, to know if your character, whether it's a fighter or something else, or a sorcerer, wizard, cleric, rogue, wants to learn a ritual. Equipment. First thing to talk about is money. There are copper pieces, silver pieces, gold pieces, platinum pieces. 1 copper equals 10 silver, 1 silver equals 10 gold. No, sorry, it's the other way. 1 copper is 1 copper. 10 copper equals 1 silver. 10 silver equals 1 gold. 10 gold equals 1 platinum. I was trying to say an opposite there for a second. Pathfinder 2nd Edition's system is silver-based. That's what we have to know about, first of all. So a lot of prices are listed in the book as silver. Some are listed as gold. Why? Because, honestly, if it's like... They're never listed as platinum, though. Silver and gold are the two that you're usually going to use the most. Copper and platinum do show up, but not very often. I don't think there's any... There are some things that are listed as copper in the adventuring gear and stuff like that. But they never list anything under platinum, because platinum is usually reserved for specialty treatments or a way to hold higher amounts of money in lesser coins. So there are reasons behind platinum, but those reasons also mean that traditionally you're not going to be having platinum coins prices listed. As I say, it's used by nobles to demonstrate wealth and to purchase very expensive things. So though platinum is out there, traditionally it's not seen in normal spending. Normally you're going to use copper, silver, gold. Where gold is equal to 10 silver, 100 copper. There are other currency items that you can have. Object arts, gems, raw materials used for crafting will be at their base price. Items have a price. If it has a slash, it can't be purchased. If it has a 0, it's normally free. So that's what you have to see is, like, slash doesn't mean it's free, it means it can't be purchased. 0 means it's free. A lot of things sell for half price. Coins, gems, object arts, and the raw materials, which I talked about, those last 3, which are extra types of currency. Oh, I'm a little off screen here. Those all can be sold for full price. I exchange a gem for its full price. I exchange this object of art for full price. But other things, half price. Items have level. This basically represents whether it's a mundane item or a magic item, the complexity of how it was built. Lower levels are easier to construct. Higher levels are more difficult to instruct. If it doesn't list a level on an item, consider it a level 0 item. Very easy to construct. You as a character can use an item of any level. I can use, as a 1st level character, a 20th level item. The thing about that is, it's going to have an impact on the game for me to have a 20th level item. Very obviously, higher level things that are outside of the purview of your characters are going to have much more of a negative impact and disrupt the game in a certain way, because they are much more powerful in general than what you should have. Using your character's level versus an item's level is a great way of comparing and figuring out what kind of items they should have, because they should be very similar. Now, you're going to be carrying stuff. There's 3 ways you can carry it. You can have it in your hand. Most characters have 2 hands. Maybe you don't, depending on your ancestry, but most do have 2 effective hands. You also have anything you can wear on your body, and then anything you can stow, traditionally in a backpack or a similar thing. Worn items are tucked into belt pouches, bandoliers, weapon sheets, and so forth, so they can be retrieved and gotten very easily. Stowed items are things in your backpack or similar container. So if I have like pockets or pouches and stuff like that, that's considered a worn item. Like, so I might have like a little pouch where I have a potion in it. You know, it's not going to hold a lot. I might hold 2 potions, but it means it's very easy for me to pull out. While any extra potions I have might be in my backpack, which is stowed, which is much more difficult to pull out. Like drawing a worn item is usually just an interact action, so it's very easy. Something that's stowed might be a little more difficult, but you'd have to interact and have a hand open. So, like a potion, you could draw it with one action, drink it with the other, very quickly. Bulk! Its carrying capacity. It's changed. It exists, but it's very different now. So, bulk is technically there. I kind of put it as it's better type of carrying capacity, but it still is a carrying capacity, so a lot of people use carrying capacity. Excuse the blow my nose. That person speeding. A lot of people use carrying capacity type stuff. Is very optional in a lot of systems that they don't talk about as much or dive into it very lightly. Bulk is a little easier, so it might be something you want to keep track of, but again, it could be a thing that you could tend to also ignore too if you want to ignore it completely. But it is a good way of keeping things limited. You have a bulk limit of 5 plus your strength modifier. Okay. If you get over that, you're encumbered. And you can't hold more than 10 plus your strength modifier. Items have a bulk value. It'll be a number, and that is its bulk. Full plate has a bulk of 4. A long scroll has a bulk of 1. Plenty of items have a bulk of L. What does this mean? It's light. They also will have negligible bulk, which is a slash mark, meaning it basically has no bulk whatsoever. You can just have as many as possible. I can have infinite pieces of paper because a piece of paper has negligible bulk. Technically, according to the system, it doesn't have a weight. They say chalk is negligible. I have 1,000 pieces of chalk. Do they weigh anything? If they do, I'm going to make it weigh something as your GM because you're insane and stupid. But for trying to get that over the wool over my eyes there, I'm not going to fall for your 1,000 pieces of chalk. I'm seeing you there trying to abuse the system. You don't get one over on me. But again, it's just being silly, you know. But in general, negligible things, you can have any number of them. Light items. You can have 10 light items, L items, and then it equals 1 bulk. The thing is, this rounds down. So if I have 9 light items, it's still 0 bulk. If I have 19, it's still 1. 11 counts as 1, but so does 19. Negligible items don't count towards bulk. Unless you're carrying a vast number of them that's determined by GM. They do actually tell you that in the book, so that's good there. Some items have an estimated bulk. You kind of have to figure out what it is. Generally speaking, every 5 to 10 pounds is 1 bulk. If it's a few ounces, is negligible. And anything in between a few ounces to 5 pounds is light. Something that's awkward to use or unwieldy might have more bulk, because it'd be harder to you to... The bulk represents your ability to carry it very effectively. Something that's bulky, is awkward or unwieldy, though it doesn't weigh as much, might be more difficult to use around. Like a 10-foot pole isn't heavy, but its length gives it that bulk of 1, because it's kind of difficult to use. It's a 10-foot pole. And if you're built for smaller or larger creatures, bulk changes sizes. Coins technically have bulk too. 1,000 coins of anything has a bulk of 1. Again, round down. Like 1,999 coins are 1 bulk, not 2. It's the exact same with light items. It's not considered light items at all. Coins as bulk is another thing to keep in track of if you're using that a lot. It's a thing that can be there. And creatures have bulk too if you want to carry something. A small creature is a bulk of 3. A medium creature is a bulk of 6. Meaning that's pretty heavy considering that normally your bulk is 5 plus your strength modifier. So you have to be pretty strong to carry a medium creature. Pretty strong. Encumbrance. I'll mention it now. It's probably going to show up in a little bit. But if you are encumbered, meaning that I have above 5 plus my strength modifier bulk, but less than 10 plus strength modifier bulk, I'm encumbered. I get clumsy 1. It's one of our conditions. And I get a minus 10 foot penalty to my speed. And it can't reduce you below 5 feet of speed. But I get slowed down by it. You can drag things. You treat the bulk as half for dragging it. That's it. You must use both hands. You drag slowly, roughly 50 feet per minute, unless you have some kind of means to speed it up. And whatever you're dragging, use the total bulk of it. Meaning if there's multiple components to it that each have their own bulk, you would half them all and add them all together then. They talk about wielding items in here. Hey, that's having an item in hand. Some things have to have one or more hands, the actions that are used to interact with it and stuff like that. There's the changing equipment chart that they give you right here. It just gives you an idea about using your items. Items can take damage. Every item has a hardness. Every item has a broken threshold and hit points. Broken threshold is when its hit points have reached half. Then it gets the broken condition. It lists those numbers. Once it reaches 0, it is destroyed. a item is broken until it's repaired above its broken threshold, which is basically, again, usually half its hit points, but it's the amount of hit points it reduced to get the broken one. There's no changes. The thing is, broken condition, as we see it here, adds some things to it. You have an item that could have the broken condition that doesn't do any of this. Still broken, still destroyed at 0 hit points. A destroyed item can't be repaired, you'd have to make a new one. And of course, hardness, HP, and broken threshold depend on the material. And objects are immune to a lot of things. So they list the stuff that it's immune to and talk about that. So you can't really mind affect an object, it's an object. Sometimes there's shoddy objects. Half the price of the standard object. Yeah, and attacks and checks are made at -2. DCs that are related to it are also a little worse. Its hit points and broke threshold are half of the normal items. You can get dubious items of value, and honestly, that's a very interesting thing to use, is you can oftentimes use this shoddy item concept for, let's say, like, creatures that don't have very good equipment. If I'm fighting a bunch of, like, let's say, trolls that have gotten some armor together, they could have just shoddy armor. It's armor, but shoddy. Armor class. We talked about armor class. 10 dex modifier, proficiency bonus, armor's AC bonus, other bonuses, penalties. That's your AC. It's a target number for you. It takes 1 minute to don light armor, 5 minutes to don heavy armor or medium armor, and 1 minute to remove any armor. Armor has a number of statistics to it. Armor can be made of spectral material and can be damaged. The type of armor determines its hardness, hit points, and break threshold. Those are important things. Armors will have a category: light, medium, or heavy. The type of armor it's used. AC bonus, how much it adds to your AC. A dex modifier cap, the maximum amount of dexterity modifier you can apply to your AC while wearing a set of armor. It could say dex mod +4, wearing half plate. If you have dex modifier 4 wearing half plate, which has a max dex of 1, you only apply 1 when wearing that armor. That's a good example of it. Armor check penalty is a penalty to strength and dex-based skill checks, except those that have the attack trait. That's an important note. If you reach the armor's strength threshold, you don't take this penalty. We'll talk about that in a second. Suits to give you a penalty. Suits of armor sometimes give you a penalty to speed. If you have other types of movement, it also affects those. It's all types of movement you have, whether you climb, swim, fly, or anything like that. It reduces them by that amount to a minimum of 5 feet. If you meet the armor's strength threshold, once again, reduce the penalty by 5 feet. That's what we get to here. Strength threshold. It's a strength score which is strong enough to overcome some of the armor's penalties. If it's equal to or greater than that value, you no longer take the armor check penalty, and decrease the speed penalty by 5 feet to no penalty if it was -5 feet, or -5 if it was 10. There you go. So, armor check penalty and strength are, pretty important. And in this case, category makes a unarmored, light armor, medium armor, heavy armor makes a difference. Because remember, what you're proficient in doesn't affect everything else here. It affects whether you add your proficiency bonus to your armor class while wearing that armor. If I am not proficient in light armor and I'm wearing leather armor, I don't add my proficiency bonus, which a lot of times is, drum roll please, even at base level of trained, 2 plus my level. If I'm level 2, I'm getting rid of 4 for my AC to wear leather armor. What does leather armor give me? +1. Wow. Oh, and a max dex cap of 4? Where I could just probably be trained in unarmored and wear unarmored and have much higher AC bonus and then just have my dexterity bonus, which might be higher than 4? Who'd have thought? Armor's a bulk. Guess what? Their bulks came back. And it's got a group. Armor groups, similar types of armor for armor specialization effects. Armor traits. Guess what? Armor has a whole bunch of traits to it. We're not going to go into the traits here. That's for something if you want to look up what each of these do. They're effectively special abilities of the armor. The ones that are listed here in the core book are bulwark, comfortable, flexible, and noisy. So keep those in mind. You want to check if your armor has those. Armor specialization effects is basically certain groups of armor get special effects for specialization. You check that in the book there. Shields. That's your AC bonus. You have to have a hand wielding a shield, and if you use the Rage Shield action, you grant the shield's AC bonus to yourself. Which means, it means that if I'm using a shield, I have to choose to use the shield every round to add the AC. Otherwise, it's not going to be helpful. There's other things you could raise a shield kind of like, but, you know, there's other discretions too. Bucklers, most of these take up a hand. Buckler doesn't take up a hand, so you can use the raise shield of the buckler if the hand is free. So. But if the buckler hand is holding something, you lose it. Tower shields have their own rules. Shields have an AC bonus if you use the raised shield. They have a hardness and a hit points and broken threshold. Why? Because the other reason you use a shield is if I'm raising a shield, I use shield block. Shield block causes the shield to take damage for you. Thanks, shield. Damage applies to its hardness. It takes the damage. Its hit points go down. Therefore, shield block is a great way. You use the shield to take damage for you. There's rules for attacking with a shield. Weapons. There's attack rolls, melee, and range. We talked about them. Multiple attack penalties, the damage rolls. Critical hits. We've talked about a lot of these things in other sections. Where if you do a strike, double damage. If you make the critical... Special attacks might have special rules for it, for critical hits and stuff like that. They talk about unarmed attacks here and improvised weapons, where you take a -2 penalty to attack rolls if you're using something that's improvised. And you're probably not going to be proficient in it, honestly. They say improvised weapons are simple weapons, so I guess if you're proficient with simple weapons, you're fine with that. Weapon statistics. That's an important thing to talk about. So, weapons have damage. It's damage dice. It tells you what that damage dice is and how many of them it normally has. So it might say 1d4, 1d6, 2d6, 1d8. It'll tell you a number. And size can change these things. Different sizes will increase the weapon die damage between them. Effects that are based on the weapon's number of damage dice apply to the weapon's normal damage dice, plus any extra dice from a striking route. Any other abilities don't count towards it. So anything that would multiply or alter things based on a weapon's number of damage dice, the two things that apply are the weapon's base damage dice and striking route. Keep that in mind for counting it too. Weapon might have a ranged. We talked about range penalties when we were talking about ranged. That it's got a ranged increment for a ranged attack, -2 penalty for each increment beyond the first. You have up to 6 range increments to attack through. Beyond that, it's impossible. So, up to a -10 penalty? Yep, -10 penalty. Who's -2 for each increment beyond the first one. Some ranged weapons will need to reload, which takes time. The entry will tell you in the weapon how long it takes to reload. If it's 0, you can draw an ammunition and fire the weapon as part of its same action. Turns out it's very easy to use. Things like I believe, a longbow, has a reload of 0. While a simple crossbow has a reload of 1, meaning it takes you 1 action. A bow, you can just go twang, twang, twang. Crossbow, you have to reload. If it's got a slash, it must be drawn and thrown. So usually it has a drawn weapon, a drawn action, an interact action to draw the weapon and then throw it. So reloading would be to draw another one, which you have a free hand with, or have switch hands if you had drew 2 at once or something like that, 2 daggers or something like that. Yeah. Sometimes they can take 2 or more actions to reload, depending on the situation. It might take time to reload. Weapons have bulk. Weapons have hands. How many hands it requires to use. Something like a longbow lists 1+ hands for its entry. What does this mean? You can hold the weapon with 1 hand, but shooting it requires a second hand. So if it says 1, 2 hands, well, then you need 1 or 2 hands, which you need to use it to wield it and hold it. If it says 2, I need to be using 2 hands to hold this thing. Something like a great sword, I believe, would be one of the ones that, requires 2 hands to hold. It's a big old sword. I have 2 hands to hold it. While a bow, I can carry around with 1 hand, but I need a second hand to shoot it. So that is why it's a 1+ weapon. Weapon groups are defined in them for special abilities and sometimes like specializations and stuff. Weapon traits. Hey, there's a lot of weapon traits, a lot more than armor. And ammunition tells you if it requires ammunition, what kind of ammunition it requires. Well, they list ammunition. The weapon traits I'm not going to get into. There's a whole lot of them that you might want to check out. And there's critical specialization effects. After this, we get into normal gear. Gear oftentimes will have stuff you can wear, hands, it's adventure gear, it's a whole bunch of stuff. It's a whole bunch of items that you can use. And it's a lot of stuff that can be useful or creative or just as adventuring things for various things. Lanterns, chests, bedrolls, oil, religious items, sacks, a sheath, a tent, various tools, water skins, belt pouches, caltrops. All these things are just general adventuring gear. There are also class kits. Class kits are basically sets of adventuring gear that are particularly useful for one class. They will oftentimes be... They're very similar, the class kits, to the base equipment that's provided by D&D 5e. 5e did a nice thing and gave a set of basic equipment a class would have. Now, granted, they also gave rules for spending money, but this is a way that you can kind of have both of them, too, in Pathfinder. 2e, it provides information on the price, the bulk it does, how much money is left over. It gives you an idea of the armor, the weapons, the gear, and anything else that you have. Pretty simple. But those kits are basically, if you want to put together equipment very quickly, get a weapon kit. Alchemical gear is something that we're going to have to talk about when we talk about magic items a little bit more. But we're just going to kind of like mention it here in general. These are things that are widely available to craft for alchemy. The most available ones are in the equipment section of the book. These are the ones that you're generally going to get. They're the lesser items in general. We'll talk more about them, but they are easy to go alchemical things you might want, including bombs, elixirs, and alchemical tools. Magical gear, similarly, does have some very cheap things that you can get that count as magical. Holy water, unholy water, minor healing potions, some simple scrolls, first level spells, and a potency crystal talisman. All these things have a cost, and we're not even talking about the level about these things now. These are things that are such, like, they're not listed for level and stuff because these are things that are just the common stuff. We're going to talk about them in a minute there. But these are the ones, these two sections here, when you're character creating, consider these two here. There are also formulas. Anything you can craft. These are alchemist items, items you can craft. If I want to craft something alchemical, it's an alchemical formula. If I want to craft a piece of armor, it's a, let's say, plate mail formula. I need to know that. With items, you can try to reverse engineer a formula and figure it out on your own. It's a downtime activity to figure it out. Then you get the formula for free. Otherwise, the item level determines how much money it is to learn the formula from 0 to 20th level. So it's expensive to learn these formulas of how to make things. But when I was again. Anyway, if you take something apart and you can't reassemble it successfully to reverse engineer it, you kind of like break it down and you can rebuild it from scratch then. If you learned how to make it. The other things that are listed in the book are, of course, services, hirelings, transportation, spellcasting. They talk about cost of living, how much it costs to live. If you want to buy some animals, some simple costs for those, like things like, oh, hey, I want a horse. Barding, like a riding horse, it's 8 gold to purchase it, or a silver per day, and it can have barding. Talks about items concise, bulk conversion, which is a pretty important thing. But that's basically what we talk about when we talk about items. There's one last section I wanted to hit up in here, because it's a complex category of all of this. We're just going to go over the basics of this. We're not going to dive into the depths of all these things. We're hitting good old crafting, magic items, and such like that. Welcome to your item listing. So we do have a few more pages to go through before we're done here, before we get to our treasure tables and our actual talking about these treasures. But this is the main thing that you're going to be encountering. All that basic equipment we just talked about, that's very first level. But after here, we dive into everything else. Well, you know, treasure comes in a lot of different forms. These items are basically a great way of adding treasure to your thing. Some of them have constant abilities. You have to investigate them to figure out what it does. That's, again, like a downtime activity. Items have an activation. Let's talk about that now. Items might have times per day, too. Or times, kind of times per play. Kind of things like that. Tells you how long it can be. But activating it usually requires some kind of action. It can be much like casting a spell. It'll tell you the number of actions or the type of action required to activate the item. In consumable items, it does its thing, it's used up. For permanent items, it basically tells you how long you would have its activation for. And this little way that it's displayed here basically tells you everything that it has. It has requirements. Sometimes you have to have something in order to activate an item. It lists it here. It will activate the basic properties of it. Long-term activation, sometimes it will have that if it takes a long time to activate it. Activation components, whether or not it requires certain components to activate it. Talks about the different ones here. A command word, envisioning in it, like a concentration, an interact, a basic action, or a component, or an interact action, or maybe you're effectively casting a spell. Those are the different versions of things. You could have limited number of activations. The item will tell you how much. Some of them need to be sustained, like sustaining spells. Remember we talked about sustaining spells? Sustaining an activation is pretty much the same activity as sustaining a spell. Dismissing activations, also very similar to the spell. An item will have its name, its level, its traits, its price. Hey, a price for a magic item? An item that has multiple prices includes the price for each type of its entry. If there's more than one type, it will list those different prices for those types. If it uses ammunition, it will tell you what kind of ammunition is available and stuff like that. It tells you its usage, whether it's held, worn, or affixed or etched into another item. It tells you its bulk. It tells you its activation. We just talked about activation and the activation type. It gives information on it. And then onset would be if it's got a delayed effect, it talks about it. Then they got their nice first section where they describe its constant abilities. If it doesn't have an activate entry, it kind of gives a paragraph here that begins with kind of things about activate. So basically, if it's something beyond the normal activation cost or activation uses, it will list it in the first description there. It'll basically, like, this is an unusual thing for activation, this is how it works. If there's types, it will list multiple types. And craft requirements, if you have to craft it. Most intro traits are, of course, alchemical. It's an alchemy item. You can craft it with craft alchemy if you've got the alchemical formula. Consumable. You use it like a potion, a scroll, or something. It's used up. Focused. It gives you an additional focus point. It's a separate pool. That's about it. Invested means it's one of the 10 magic items that you have to invest in. Remember I said you can invest in 10 magic items? Why, yes, I did say 10 magic items were there. And that was one of those things. And we could see that... I'm trying to go to invested item here. Sorry. That's a held item. I was just trying to quickly go to an item to use it as an example of this here. Oh, yeah. No. I'm trying to find one that has the invested. Anyway, yeah, if anything has the invested trait in there, it's one of the 10 items that you have to invest in order to use it. Yeah, a lot of worn things are invested. But yeah, like Horseshoes of Speed, invested. That's Companion. A Headband of Wisdom, invested. You can only have 10 magic items with the invested trait. You can carry something that's not invested, but remember, after you're done resting, you choose which 10 magic items you have invested for the day. It still would be a physical item, like if it's a hat, even if you're not invested in it for its magical abilities, it's still a hat that keeps it often. And then magic energies for magic items. So magic and alchemical are the two different ones that you're going to kind of hit into a lot with this. Items have levels here. We talked about the levels when we talked about the other equipment here. Thanks, motorcycle. But certainly speaking, it kind of gives an idea of the best level that is. A third level character the best items to give it are third level items. It can have a fourth level or higher item, but it's kind of finding it or affording it would be more difficult. It should be much more of a challenge to gain that kind of thing. And crafting those items, you can only craft something that's equal to your level or lower. There are multiple types of items exist. Sometimes, like, items can kind of be combined, and then they've got, like, a level kind of plus symbol. It's kind of hard to describe. Anyway, I would take a drink here while I try to organize my thoughts. So, okay. If there are multiple types of an item, it'll have the minimum level with a plus sign. What this means is, sorry, brain fart for there for a second. It'll list under the other types their levels, but for the base form that is kind of describing, that gives its level, and then the plus sign means, oh, go look at the other ones for the things. Of course, price is the basic price. Usage, held or worn, attached or fixed. Held or worn, of course, would mean I have to have it in my hand to use it. I have to be wearing it to use it. It has to be a worn item. The attached or fixed means you're basically putting it on with something else. Crafting requirements, just basically all the materials, spells, alignments, or the things that are required to craft something. So alchemical items are the other big section we're going to talk about here, because it is one of the two big sections to talk about. They aren't magic items. They are technically easier and cheaper to make, by far. Let's see here. Treasure by level. Oh, yeah. If I would go all the way to, let's say, 20th level. I don't think there's a 20th level bomb for alchemical bomb. Well, there's some pretty high level ones. Oh, yeah. Here you go. Acid Flak Major is a 17th level bomb. 2,500. Certainly, it is cheaper than some 16th level things. Well, it's consumable for one thing, and it's alchemical for another. It's still expensive, but it's less expensive. So the ingredients in it could cause it to be magical. It's very powerful. It can have equivalency to a magic item of its level as an alchemical item, and there come in bombs, elixirs, and poisons, but it's technically not magical. It is a subcategory. They are things that are a lot easier to make, quotation mark wise. You know, they're easier to make because they aren't actually magical, different requirements, and oftentimes have to be crafted, oftentimes cheaper. But again, things might have the splash trait for alchemical bombs. Elixirs are traditionally kind of drank or fed to another creature, with mutagens as being one of their things. Poisons are contact, ingested, inhaled, or injury, depending on them. And there's alchemical tools. This is the first kind of section of things you can get into. And again, you could just get alchemical items. You don't have to get other magical items. And alchemical items would probably do you very good. A lot of them are pretty powerful. It's just that they are usually a lot of very usable only once items or low use abilities. And so they oftentimes are a little better to like craft them, honestly. But using them for your team of characters might be useful too. Armor is just that, it's armor. It's magic armor. There's special materials for armor that you can get. Those adamantine, cold armor, darkwood, dragonhide, elven chain, mithril, orichalcum, silver are all special types of materials with their own rules for that. The making your armor out of that material gives them special effects. It changes their bulk and stuff too. They are of leveled, but they aren't magical normally. They could be rare. Like orichalcum is a rare thing. Mithril is uncommon. So it's possible to get mithril. It's very uncommon to get mithril, but it's possible to get mithril. Basic magic armor has some basic rules for it. With a combination of armor potency, resistance. There are rules for magic armor. There's also specific magic armors that you can get. If you want to take up the look, there is the magic armor chart, just similar to magic weapon chart. Am I putting it correctly? Right here. This little chart here. That gives you all the basic information for effectively any kind of magic armor I want, basically, that has very little special abilities, and it's just magic armor. That entire section there takes the place of what would be in, honestly, D&D 5e, Pathfinder, or any other ones, just like +1 armor, +2 armor. Well, now you've got +1 armor, but you also have resiliency armor. The +1, the proficiency rune, adds bonus to AC. The resiliency rune adds bonuses to saves. And your armor will have a combination of both of these, up to +3 of both of them at the 20th level. So +3 to both armor and save defenses, kind of things like that. So it does have some pretty good uses there. Consumables take the form of ammunition, of course. You've got magical ammunition. Oils, which you put on things. They're like a potion, except you're not drinking it. You're just applying it to something. Whether it's an item or creature. Potions you drink. Scrolls you read off of. Cast a spell. So yeah. Give rules for the spells. Talismans. They're a magical charm, gemstone, or small object that can be affected to a armor, weapon, or shield. So they kind of like you put it on a shield. It's a consumable item with the talisman trait that gives you basically a special ability once per that shield or whatever you fixed it to. I put a talisman on my sword. I can once use something for my sword. Yeah. I'm just going through the book here so I go through this properly. Held items. Things you hold on to. Hey, guess what? There's a nice held item called a bag of holding. Why are these held items? Because in order to use them, you have to hold them in one hand. So it's sort of like I got to pick up the bag of holding and open it up to get into it. Things like crystal balls, decanters of endless water, chimes of opening, ever-burning torches, they're all one item. These are a lot of the wondrous items they were before, but now they're kind of defined as held items because you got to hold them. Got to put them in your hands. Materials are listed in this section because it just talks about all the different materials you can use and gives you an idea of hardness, basic hit points, and broken threshold, precious materials and stuff like that. We can talk about runes because that's a much more customization of things. So magic items and weapons gain a lot of their power from runes. This is much more customization in it. Things like that armor proficiency, weapon proficiency, the resilient, the striking runes are the basic runes. Remember when I talked about that magic armor before, the basic statistics of it? What two things did it use? Armor proficiency and resiliency. Magic weapons, which I haven't gotten to now, use two different runes. Striking and weapon potency. The thing about runes is, using just directly the runes, there's a bunch of property runes, and those give basic properties and can kind of break down in a lot more broader way. So this is a little bit more of an in-depth looking at using the rune system to basically enchant something. You can be simpler, or you can go to a little bit more in depth. Because honestly, you can just buy the magic armor with 2 runes on it and call it a day. It's got this basic statistics in the book. Shields are very similar. They have specific shields, press and material shields, or the basic shield rules do exist here just the same way. Snares exist here. They are traps that you can use. They are consumable. They can be crafted. Staffs. A staff gains a charge when someone prepares it for the day. The person prepared a staff can expend a charge to cast a spell from it. You can cast a spell from a staff only if you have the spell on your spell list, are able to cast spells at the appropriate level, and expend the number of charges from the staff equal to the spell's level. Cast spells for a staff requires you to hold the staff. There you go. Ooh, good old staffs. I think there's a maximum number of charges, but I would have to figure that out there. Yeah. Oh, gains charges. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm guessing the staff itself has a number of charges. How much staff does the charges have? That's a good question. I'm just trying to find that out quickly and efficiently because it's been a while since I've looked at it. But it does say the staff gains a number of charges and prepares it for the day. Yeah, unusual that I can't find the number of charges. They must say it somewhere in here. I'm just missing it. I love that. Okay, under numbers you can prepare a staff and add charges to it for free. When you do so, staff gains a number of charges equal to the level of your highest level spell slot. Ah! You don't need spells to say you can prepare no more than one staff per day, nor can staff prepare more than once per person per day. Okay, so I got you there. Cool. Interesting speaking then. So, like, that does limit the spells from charges per day. Interesting. That. Oh, okay, so like high level ones do cap out at 6. The Staff of Power has 7th level spells in it. But that means you really could only cast a 7th level spell from it, which is kind of weird. They have a maximum number of that per day. Huh. Okay. And you have to have it prepared on your list. Okay. Oh, you can place some of your own math in the spell to increase the number of charges if you're prepared or spontaneous. Okay. So this prepared... I get it now. Okay, sorry. Staff is very different in this edition, and I haven't played with the staff yet, so it took me a minute here to realize how it works. But I understand now. So, let's give an example. I can cast 7th level spells. I have a staff. I add 7 charges to it. As a prepared spellcaster, I can put some of my own spells into it to add a number of charges. I expend a number of spell slots to add charges to staff equal to the level of the spell. A spell slot to add... you can't expend more than one spell that's way for days, so I can basically double the number of spells, of charges it has. So that makes sense. Then I could cast, let's say, if I'm using Staff of Power, which I have to be like, cast like 9th level spells, I would have 18 points. I could cast 2 of the 7s and a 4 from that one. Gotcha. Spontaneous can reduce the number of charges it takes to activate it by supplementing it with their own energy. They can expend 1 charge of their staff and 1 of their spell slots to cast a spell from the staff of same level or lower. Oh! Well, spontaneous are so much better at charges. Oh, Jesus. I like that one better. So spontaneous basically can... so, good and bad. Prepared doesn't use up any of their own spells, except for the one that they use to charge it. Spontaneous, it gives them more spell selection, because you use 1 charge to expel a spell slot of equal or lower, of the same level. The same level or lower as the expended spell slot. Okay. Okay. So whatever spell I use, I can cast a spell of that level or lower. So if I expend a 7th level spell slot, I can, and 1 charge from the thing for the Staff of Power, I can cast that 7th level spell, the Staff of Power, or any of the lower level spells by doing that one. The same level or lower as that. So neat. There you go. Cool. Or you can spend all the charges to do it without using your spell slots too. And you can smack things with stats. Hey, magical structures. Structure traits. It's something that's built. Jeez. Sorry. Dropping things. Cool. I like how they do staffs differently. I'm going to be honest about that one. Structures are things like Instant Fortress. Wands. Cool. It's a spell I can cast once per day. It must be on your spell list. It uses your information for that. But otherwise, it's once per day. And you can overcharge it by doing a flat DC check. But it breaks the wand or destroys it. And so if you try to overcharge the second time, you can cast it twice. But that's what a wand is. It's a kind of like a potion or a scroll, except it's just a once per day, so you can get an extra use of something. But it's at will. That's an infinitum then. So I do like also the way they do wands a little differently. That rather than I got 50 charges or something like that, or I have number charges, that's like, oh, I just do it once per day as an extra use of this, you know. I might have a bunch of first level wands, because they give an example of Wand of Heal, which only costs 60 gold. That's pretty cheap. You're up to 9th level wands, though, too, for 40,000. So, I mean, that's a little different than they used to have. They didn't used to have such high-level wands. You should link up to 4. So, and, of course, weapons. Same as armor, precious material. The basic rules are in the book, too, then, if you want to look at the basic rules, which is then the striking and weapon enchantment, weapon potency runes. Those are the 2 runes related to it. And then, of course, some specific ones. Worn items have different traits. You must have the worn items have the invested trait very often. Guess why? Because, I mean, like, they wear them. So even more than 10. An apex item. Okay, so apex item improves your ability score, increasing it by 2 or to a total of 18, whichever is a higher score. You get all the benefits of the new ability score until the investorate rune runs out, until you invest again. You know, until you invest again. So increasing intelligence lets you become trained in additional skill and learn a new language, increasing contribution to your hit points, and so on. So you would, if you invest in a intelligence-based thing, you do apparently get the additional trained skill in languages right then and there. Okay, the thing about, they say for like the diadem and intellect is, which is the intelligence one, the first time you invest in it, you choose your skill and language you get when you're invested in it, and you get that same one every time. So that's an important distinction for that one at least. We're almost done here too. We're very close to being done. Woo! Breathe again. Finally cleared out some of that stuff. Companion items are items that would go to your animal or beast that's assisting you. It's got the companion trait. And of course, that is just the general list of worn items. Other worn items. I'm gonna, you know, they list all the stuff that I would hear. I'm just curious. Worn eyepiece. Does that mean I could just wear multiple eyepieces? Like, it doesn't say you can't, which is the silly thing. And I'm just curious about that one. Hi, Worm. Well, you know what? I'm just going to go for, it doesn't say you can't, so multiple eyepieces, many hats. I'm going to wear 10 hats. I don't think there's 10 hats to wear. But yeah, that's basically, I think, the end of it there. Cool. Wham. We're done that. Oh, and we're done for today. Another long one that we took. Honestly, I probably could have split this up a little bit. Probably magic could have been its own section, but I was unsure about it, and I kind of wanted to finish up this entire thing here. So I hope all of you can see the cut down and breakdowns. I will have breakdowns in where all the different sections are if you want to go straight to any of these in the course of the video, but and stuff. But I hope everybody learned about basically the rest that you need to know about as a PC in Pathfinder 2nd edition. This should cover a lot of the basics. Like the magic items and like alchemical items and stuff, certainly you're going to encounter them. But again, it's a lot more on the GM side for that one in particular that you have to know about it. But you provide those things to your players, and then they have them, and then they use them, and then they are familiar with them. The same can be said for a lot of this stuff here. It's just getting the idea here. The basics we started with are just simply the rest of what your characters do. Magic section, hopefully you got an idea about how the magic system works a little differently than it did in other editions, but a lot of that is standard fare for a lot of these RPGs and how they work. The equipment is kind of the same way, and the magic items, there's a lot of standard fare, but it was fun to... I swear I knew that at one point in time, but my brain just fried out on the staffs and wands, the way they worked. I'm sure I encountered those before and learned those back in the day, but, you know, if after 2 hours. Anyway, I'm going to say farewell for now to everybody. Everybody, goodbye. I hope you learned enough. I hope you're ready now for your Pathfinder 2nd Edition games to play in them. GMs, I might have some more stuff for you in the future to talk about, but there's plenty of other stuff in the Pathfinder 2e world to talk about, and the Pathfinder world to talk about in the future. But for now, I'm going to say, players, farewell. Perhaps next time we talk about this when they release a new book with more ancestries, classes, and all those kind of like things. New stuff to talk about. We'll see. Or maybe some of the other books I'll look through and find some stuff that's really great to talk about to inform you players out there. And certainly GMs too. But, I mean, there's more for you players. More for you players right now. Anyway, I will once again say to all of you out there, farewell from me. Have yourselves a great day. I bid you a deep and wonderful farewell.